Hello, welcome to All Good Points Lockdown Edition. I'm Paul North.
I'm George McBride.
George, we're not in our usual comfy studio with our teas and Ben and Ant telling us off. We've made our own home studios in which I look like some kind of zombie creature and you look glowing.
Yeah, I've got a nice lamp and you've got a broken lamp, but it's not as good, is it? Make do in times of pandemic.
Yeah.
But I'd rather not be doing this from my front room. I'd rather be sat next to you. But
Thanks,
neither of us want to be spreading anything around. So we're locked down fully, but we're still bringing you that important cannabis content, keeping you up to date on what's going on in cannabis around the world. Things are happening. A lot of us are just sat at home and have been for a year, but there are things happening elsewhere in the world.
It's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that. And we joke about this like every time we do it, and it obviously become like a bit, I don't know, yeah, almost like a bit of a meme that would be like, and loads of stuff has happened, and loads of things have happened. But even though we've had a couple of weeks off, obviously like readjusting to setting all this up and stuff for lockdown, but I don't know, is the news that we're about to talk about the most significant thing that's happened since we started recording? Is this probably the largest piece of news? Probably
I'm at risk of doing this every week.
Yeah, every week,
but I do think the main news story this week is the biggest thing that's happened since we started recording. Yeah. And potentially a lot longer. The biggest thing that's happened in years in a lot of respects.
Definitely, and so we're talking. Let's break it down. So we're talking about Georgia. We're talking about what's taken place in Georgia with the runoff. So George, just gives a little bit of an overview of what's happened over there and why this is such, for the cannabis industry in particular, why this is such a significant moment.
So the two Democratic candidates, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, won the Georgia Senate runoff. So the Democrats now have control of the Senate and the House of Representatives, meaning that as long as they can keep their own party in order, they can pass whatever laws they want. That means that there is an incumbent, from the moment of inauguration later today, there's an incumbent US government that is in favour of cannabis reform and is actually capable of passing the laws to make that happen. So no more historic votes that don't actually count towards anything. That over the next 4 years, if the votes happen in the right way, we could see real reform at the federal level in the United States, which would be just phenomenally important and influential, both in the US and around the world.
It would be absolutely massive, wouldn't it? It would send such clear signals as well. Talking about here in Europe, it would send such a clear signal about the practicality of the reforms. Like we have such a good relationship with America. I think Canada was significant, and Canada obviously has been a massive help here because we have good relationships with Canada. But like for the states, further reforms in the states, for them to go federally legal would just be, it would be incredible, wouldn't it? For those of us over here, hopeful of further European reform, it'd be absolutely massive. And I guess before, when we first spoke about this and we spoke about Biden and Harris, we were saying, I guess we were thinking about this being quite cautious, saying it would just be good if the cannabis industry in America could bank their money, like that on its own would be good. But really here, the reality is we're talking about way, much more significant legislation, right? The Banking Act would be part of it, but they would have the ability to go way further.
We have to remember that cannabis isn't top of the agenda, obviously. There's the economy and COVID is going to be his top concerns. Yeah. But also have to remember that cannabis is a much bigger issue in the US. It's a huge industry. It is a much more salient public policy issue over there than it is in the UK. So I'm expecting it to be on the agenda, although not high up, and expecting to see some of these reforms happen. Don't want to speculate too much on quite which ones will happen. My biggest fear is that the left falls out with each other. There's
The
arguments.
classic.
Yeah, the classic. People wanting much wider reform and then trying to stifle any proposed reform, saying they don't go far enough, which is a threat. And with such a narrow control of the Senate, it is possible. But then I don't think many people could have called the Georgia runoffs with great accuracy. They were so close. And there were a lot of people who weren't expecting two Democratic candidates, one Jewish and one black, to win in a deep South state, which has been voting Republican time after time for decades. But it happened. And I think that was the most difficult bit of all of this, was actually the Democrats being in control of both houses. And that is really, really exciting.
Yeah, big time. It's really important they don't fall out. It's such a left wing thing, that isn't it, with governments?
Yeah.
We're in a position to do really well, right? Okay, so what do we not disagree on? Sorry, what do we disagree on? Let's all fall out of each other. So hopefully they don't go down that route.
Hopefully they don't. And God knows what we're going to see. It's probably not going to be as unpredictable as Trump. Interesting that lots of people thought he'd be good for cannabis. He hasn't done a huge amount, but he also didn't interfere. And then have you seen his latest bizarre actions, including on the one end executing a few very poor criminals, which to much ire, and then on the other hand pardoning over 100 very rich criminals, including cannabis entrepreneur and rapper Lil Wayne, which I don't know about you, but wasn't expecting that to be top of a president's priorities list.
I just want to know if he's gonna get Tiger King off the hook.
Is that on the card?
Yeah, and Julian Assange. There's
he can't now. He did his final pardon.
He did, but apparently he can do some in private without releasing the information. So what's the Tiger King called again? What's his name? I can't remember his name. But if you just see him walking the streets, you might have let him out. Because some people expect Julian Assange to be let off. But
I don't think letting that guy out is a good idea. I've only watched the documentary, but
I think everyone on that
documentary I felt like he needs to be excluded from society.
He's not well. On the drug point, making Tiger King relevant, we'll come back to other stuff. But that series blatantly has a major drug story in it that's not talked about. So many. I know they kind of mention methamphetamine a little bit, but I think the majority of people interviewed and talked about it. And I was watching it thinking there's a undertone that it kind of makes light of it, but there's an undertone of really severe drug use in that around methamphetamine and stimulant drugs. A lot of those characters aren't well. Are they?
No.
A lot of them are deeply well. Anyway, so yeah, Trump's. I mean,
also,
the inaugurations.
Also, a lot of bad hair, which is a theme of 2020 continuing into 2021. Why? Your hair's a bit of a state. My hair is under a hat because it's a state.
Yeah, it is definitely a theme of 2021. So yeah, well done, Georgia. Exciting times, and that's something we'll keep talking about. We'll keep an eye on it. I think as the year progresses, the reforms in the States will be certainly at the top of the agenda. So we'll keep an eye out and see how it pans out. But really excited, really exciting stuff. Sticking on North America, on the States, Illinois have been acting very responsibly, showing some good stuff. They've collected $62 million in tax revenue from cannabis sales, and they've said they're going to put it towards social equity programs. So the intention is to spend it to help minority businesses and neighborhood development. They've not spent it yet, but the state senator has said that it's a priority for them to do so. Alongside that, which is good on its own, they've also expunged 500,000 cannabis cases. So it could take up to 4 years to work for all the cases, but nearly 500,000 have been thrown out heading into 2021. And then alongside that, they've said that they're going to create a program to reinvest 25% of all tax revenue from cannabis sales into a fund for youth development, which is great. I'd really like to see that kind of policy put in place, because I think. I assume you're similarly positive vibes of it, George, but I think there's a lot of criticism of the industry and the need for the industry to take social justice seriously and to give back to communities and groups that have been disproportionately affected by what's obviously been a pretty disastrous war on drugs, particularly in terms of social harms. But and there is a need for businesses to take that seriously, and that absolutely is an important conversation. But we should also recognise the power that governments have, and at state level or a wider level, federal level in North America, for them to implement programs which make that a thing. So I remember when I first joined VaultFast, one thing we talked about a lot was the need for drug education and drug treatment that could be funded through such schemes, right? Absolutely no reason why here in the UK, on a legally regulated cannabis market, you couldn't take money out to fund drug treatment, fund youth schemes and stuff. So
It
good
makes
to
a
see.
lot of sense for the proceeds of the sale of drugs to go towards mitigating the harm of drug use, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah,
It's
absolutely,
very, very compelling
yeah,
argument.
definitely.
Hard to disagree with it.
And it helps. I think it helps us here when we can point to schemes and programs where that's actually gone on. Because I know when I've debated legalisation, you'll get this in the left and the right, but people will be like, oh, cannabis legalisation, that'll just be like alcohol and tobacco and gambling, and all they'll think about is top line profits. They won't think about people. They won't think about societal impacts. Like, the market carries a great risk with it, and looking at some elements of the alcohol and the gambling, the tobacco industry, there's there in some cases fair reflections. In other cases, people have gone over the top of it. But it's really good to see programs and examples where we can say, oh no, look at this. Similarly, the whole one with young people smoking less in legal regulated markets, something we say all the time, and people are like, yeah, you say that, but now we've got data emerging out of North America, and we can say, no, actually, look at the stats. It's quite a good thing, quite positive. So yeah, well done, Illinois, well done, Illinois. Uh, George, would you ever fancy getting high in hospital? Is that something that interests you?
Um,
Legally, legally, legally,
yeah,
legally high in
well,
hospital. Well,
yeah, yeah. It'd
good
be
news.
better. Whenever I've been in hospital, it's been all opiates, all the fentanyl
All
and
the,
all the
well,
morphine and what have you. None of the
Thailand.
cannabis.
Thailand's the place for you, George. Break a leg in Thailand. Because in Thailand, in the hospital, they've started basically serving. They've got a weed menu. They've got items on the menu in which THC's in the product. So from
Is
spicy
this
happy.
definitely is this definitely legitimate news? Because it does sound a lot like an
Are
April
you
Fool's Day article.
are you doubting my sources? I've got
But
quotes from people that work in the kitchen.
it's a very
Don't doubt
it's
me.
on the one
It's
hand
all.
kind of completely unbelievable, and on the other hand, it does sound like the kind of thing that would happen in Thailand. From my
It's com-
experience of being in Thailand, it does sound like quite a Thai thing to do.
Listen, you are seriously making me doubt the validity of these sources, but this is from French 24 News website, who I'm very, very confident in.
Yeah,
From from spicy happy salads to soup sprinkled with cannabis shoots and deep fried cannabis leaves, not mushroom leaves. A Thai hospital restaurant has rolled out a weed-inspired menu, which has customers flocking to sample its euphoric-inducing offerings.
mm.
That's quite good, isn't it?
Unfortunately, there's hardly any non-Thai nationals in Thailand at the moment, is there? Because of Corona and everything, they tried to get people to come over, and it didn't really
Yeah,
work.
yeah, it's not the best. Global travel's not really on the menu.
No,
But maybe later in the year, George, that could be a holiday destination. Because you're quite clumsy.
I end up in hospital a lot. I've
One
spent,
of your, one of
I've
your
spent
favourite
a lot. I've
pastimes.
spent a lot of my adult life in hospital and a lot of my adult life in Thailand. So it feels like it's all coming together. The cannabis entrepreneurial
Yeah,
activities, the injury prone,
yeah.
and liking Thailand.
There you go, mate. Get out there, break a leg. The McBride menu.
Dream.
Yeah, McBride's
You
instead of
just said
McDonald's.
my name. I'm not
Mc,
getting
they're
it.
McBride's. That could be the name of the chain in the hospital that serves the cannabis infused food. In fact, it's just like your skunk and chips idea.
Yeah, I was going to say this is very skunk and chips. This is my long
People,
term, long term vision. My cannabis
dude,
infused
yeah, we did a podcast
traditional
about it.
English chip shop.
Yeah, with THC batter, so you get
Yeah,
batter.
but then also they could, do simple surgical procedures there as well. Maybe.
Get in there for your skunk and chips and a simple surgical procedure. Sounds
Yeah.
great. Well, they're already on it in Thailand, George. Get over there. UK war on drugs update. Just to update people on the war on drugs and how that's going. The government have invested a further 40 million into law enforcement targeting drug gangs. You feeling hopeful for that, George? No.
No.
What about this? 28 million into the ADDA project, Addiction, Diversion, Disruption, Enforcement, Recovery. That's what ADDA stands for. Combining policing with treatment and recovery services. I mean, it's better than just full-on targeting drug gangs. It sounds like there's an element of diversion and recovery in there, which isn't the end of the world. But the real news that was sort of hitting our Twitter feeds was twofold. One today was around the money that the government have put into drug treatment, an extra 80 million to help fund drug services across England, increase the number of places for prison leavers on community sentences, funding detox beds and rolling out life-saving naloxone. And the other is the deputy director job. Just to jump in on the funding thing, obviously working in treatment, I caught the back. I got out of treatment just as the cuts really started to hit home, and you would see sort of like, yeah, like 50% redundancies in some places. In Birmingham, they had their budget halved, straight, yeah, the straight up 50% cut. But in most drug treatment services, you know, you weren't recruiting, you were kind of cutting staff down. 80 million is obviously better than nothing, but it's absolutely nowhere near enough to address the level of need that exists amongst that population. Like 80 million just does not
No,
go
it's
not go
just
far
over
enough.
a quid per person to deal with
Yeah,
their potential drug issues. Obviously, not everybody has drug issues. It's a smaller cohort than that.
yeah,
But if you think about it like that, then you realise
yeah.
it's not much money.
It's not enough. I mean, I think fair play and respect to the groups that are lobbying hard for that and raising awareness of it. There's people doing some fantastic work on it, and I'm glad that the government have recognised that there does need to be an increase in that funding. You know, it's better than them just saying we're leaving it as it is. Drug treatment populations are reducing. Why should we put more money in? But it's just they need way more to deal with that cohort. They're a really complicated cohort. And
The
then
bit,
secondly, go on, mate.
yeah, I
No,
think
go on.
you were going to go on to the bit that I was going to say, that advertising for the job.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
Well, so the Home Office is advertising for a new deputy director role, which would oversee their drug strategy. So this is quite interesting because the Home Office doesn't have a great history of very joined up between departments or with other departments of government. And this is advertising for a new senior role for somebody to come in. Now, there's lots of talk in the job application around reducing drug use or reducing drug misuse. It's going to be, it looks like more of the same, but then the fact that they're hiring somebody in to oversee it also suggests that that person will have some power to change the policies at quite a high level in the Home Office and have quite a significant influence over drug policy in the UK, which is quite new because it's just been a lot of the same for a long time from the Home Office. And there is the outside possibility that this is a signal that things could change. Also, they could change in the wrong direction. Let's see who they hire.
Yeah,
Um,
see what I mean. I think who they hire will be a big indication as to the angle they want to go down. My fear is that they bring in sort of like a Centre for Social Justice type character who's got that kind of takes that kind of classic social conservative line of our drug policies should protect the most vulnerable people in society, but we do that through kind of strict enforcement, and this is their sensible recommendation that for social justice sometimes talk about, you know, sensible diversion schemes, which is good, but then they obviously have major issues going a step beyond that. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There was a lot of talk on Twitter about it. A lot of people recognizing that job description has gone a little bit further than they may have done in the past in terms of recognizing that, you know, it's a time for change, it's a time for reviewing the evidence. So it's interesting. It could, as we've talked about before, it could be a bit of a Blair Gibbs thing, depending on who gets it. You know, when there was a big splash around Blair Gibbs when Boris Johnson brought him in to be special advisor. Obviously, his role with you guys with VoteFast and stuff, working with us all in the past, been a bit of a stir. So yeah, interested to see who gets it.
we
Jersey,
will report back as
we'll
and when
report
we
back.
know. Yeah.
We'll get them on.
Why not? We need to
They'll,
when it's all
they'll come on. We'll chat to them.
yeah.
Imagine. Jersey granted license to grow medical cannabis. You might know a little bit about this, George.
Yeah, well, we can take a little tiny bit of the credit for that. We assisted them with the license application. They did most of the work themselves, but we did a little bit of help. It's exciting. It's the first license to commercially supply cannabis that's been granted um, in the British Isles for 20 years, excluding GW Pharma and its partners. So this is starting to see opening up of the cannabis industry, and it's a small step, but it's a pretty monumental one in the grand scheme of things, because we're actually going to have cannabis being produced on the British Isles, which hopefully will be making its way to patients in the UK. And previously, patients have been relying 100% on imports. I think going along with the story, it's the INCB, the department of the UN that monitors international trade in controlled substances. They massively upped the allowance for the UK to expecting 2.8 tons of cannabis to be consumed by UK patients. So that is all coming together to be quite positive signals for, even though it's happening very slowly, there is a proper medical cannabis industry now being built on the British Isles, and it's not just GW, which
That's great.
is
That's great.
which
That's
is
really
good.
good. Well done. And do give yourselves credit. You guys smashed it. That's a great. That's great.
Most of
Big,
the credit should go to
big.
Northern Leaf, though, who are the license recipient, and they've got a lot of work to do now. They've got that go ahead, but it'll be exciting to watch them grow and see where they go.
Definitely. Good luck to them. All good. All good points. All good signs. France of there's a few bits going on with the French Parliament as we are recording this right now.
Yeah.
Um, our boy Josh Torrance is speaking to the French Parliament with Steve Rolls and Neil Woods being interviewed about cannabis reform, what they should do around it, hearing the evidence, which is good. It's a good sign. Glad that conversation is going on. And to complement that, they've launched a a question online questionnaire to gauge public opinion around people's appetite for recreational use of cannabis, which is good. Good sign. It's nice to see a government, taking that issue seriously and wanting to hear from people on the perceptions. And the reason this is of particular interest to me is I think, I mean, this spoiler alert. This is something we're going to campaign on later in the year. But like I think there is a real disconnect between politicians and the public and the industry around cannabis. And I think that the public are ready for it. In most countries, polling is pretty favourable for cannabis reform, and if it's not at 50%, it's going in that direction. And if you look at the industry, you know this better than me, George, but like nearly every industry that's worth talking about is getting ready for cannabis. The tech industry is all over it in North America. The food beverage industry has been all over it since the beginning. The logistics industry is really excited about how they can tackle some of those issues of transporting controlled substances. They're really interested. The law, like it just goes on. You name an industry, it's basically getting ready and it's interested in cannabis. Food industry, there are loads of big like cereal producers that are like, right, great, what role can we play in this? And so the industry's ready, the public are ready. I think it's politicians that there's an element of disconnect between politicians and the public. We talk a lot about North America, and we talk a lot about the States. I think the reason the reforms happen in the States is because it's people-led politics. You get enough of your mates together, you go put a ballot in. Well, not just your mates. I've got nowhere near enough. But if you create a movement and you get a load of people to put ballots in, you're forcing an issue. It's this kind of people-led politics. Whereas here, it's much more bureaucratic in some ways, and I think we kind of look to politicians as elites to be like, you guys know what's best for us, and I think that over time has created a little bit of a disconnect between where we're at and where politicians are at, and it's vital that that's brought to the attention of politicians, and I'm glad that the French Parliament are expressing interest in doing so. But I think I don't know what we've not spoken about this before, George. So I don't know what your take is on that as the framing of that. Whether you think.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. It's all been driven by public ballot initiatives and court decisions around the world, not
Yeah.
by political decisions, and that
Yeah.
will change now because we're in a different situation, and we've already seen politicians driving reform in the US, and it's going to be the same as New York looks to legalise, and other states that haven't done so through public ballot initiatives, but have done so like from politically led campaigns within government. And so it will change, but I think that is definitely the story of how it's gone so far.
Yeah, defo. Celebrity watch for you. I don't know if you're aware of this one, but Dog the Bounty Hunter's in the game.
I've seen this one, yeah. Everyone
Got it.
is these days.
He's gone in on the CBD though, as Dog. He's playing it safe. Just keeping it safe with CBD. Imagine that show when you get in the back. Have you ever used to watch it?
I've seen clips. Who hasn't seen clips? But...
When he gets them in the back of that vehicle and he sits them down and delivers that intervention, it's a powerful piece of TV. But he has said not a massive fan of Dog. I'm not over the moon about Dog getting involved in the space because he has said some pretty horrendous stuff.
Oh yeah,
if you Google him,
not a fan of drug users, is he?
He's not a fan of people that aren't white.
Oh right.
Where that might be slightly slanderous, I'll speak to Steph as to whether we can leave that in. But yeah, he's.
I don't think Dog watches, if I'm honest.
No, but his friend's mate. He's a popular guy. You got to be careful, John.
Be careful who you slander.
He'll be outside my door if you've got a warrant for me. Mexico update. The Mexican government have issued regulations on their medical cannabis program. We talked about Mexico in the past few shows, and they keep kind of kicking it down the path a little bit. It's kind of something that you've kind of expressed a little bit of ambivalence around them ever actioning, George, because they've been kicking it down the path for
not ever. It will happen. I just think they're going to take their sweet time about it. So there'll be loads more announcements of delays and votes and changes to the policies and whatever. I'm not expecting the industry to be a thing this year, but I'm hoping I'll be proved wrong.
There's a couple of key areas that they release. That the legislation that they've released allows for public and private research, provides quality control measures, including manufacturing practices. I mean, that's always going to be the case. Both Mexican citizens and foreigners are permitted to travel in the country with their products. This opens a door for medical cannabis tourism. A deliberate objective of these regulations and mirrors what we've seen in some places in Southeast Asia. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I'm interested to see whether medical cannabis tourism becomes an actual thing. That we were talking about Thailand and their cannabis hotel, and Thailand have been doing a big push for like COVID tourism, as in get people to come over, quarantine, and then stay in the country for months and hide out the pandemic in the sun, and that didn't really happen. They got hardly any travellers from Europe or North America or elsewhere, and I kind of feel like the medical cannabis tourism might go the same way. There was a lot of talk in Jamaica about a big medical cannabis tourism industry. I haven't really seen it happen there, so we shall see. That said, Colorado's done very well at cannabis tourism since 2012. It's been a big thing over there, so it's not like it hasn't happened somewhere.
I can't remember a time when we could be tourists. That's what I mean.
No, I've kind of forgotten leaving my sitting room, if I'm honest.
Lockdown.
Well,
I can't even imagine that being like, oh yeah, we could go places. Maybe when
nice, wasn't it?
Those were the days. They'll return, but will they? Depends how the vaccines go, doesn't it, George? Depends how the vaccines go. And then finally, the Amsterdam tourist coffee shop ban. This comes up every now and again, doesn't it? That this is like a skunk psychosis story.
Yeah,
what other one?
It's one of the most relentless stories in cannabis, isn't it? It's just this constant looming threat of a ban on foreign nationals using Dutch, or in particular Amsterdam coffee shops. And I can see why the Dutch get pissed off with foreigners coming and, you know, using the coffee shops and misbehaving and whatever else. But every attempt so far has failed spectacularly at trying to keep the Dutch coffee shop market for Dutch people alone. But maybe it finally will happen.
Fingers crossed, George. Fingers crossed. Maybe. No, not fingers crossed. That would be bad. Don't ban tourists.
if everyone in the Netherlands wants to stop English people coming over and misbehaving while stoned off their heads, they should push cannabis legalisation in the UK. They should switch their plan round
So
and
it is
stop
good for
trying
us.
to row back on their own liberal reforms and try and make sure that, if they got Germany and the UK to legalise cannabis, they'd have no more of these twats coming in and making a scene in their
I
country.
love this. This is like the whole not in my backyard thing. We need some NIMBYs.
Yeah.
We need some Dutch NIMBYs to really help us. So it doesn't have to be in their backyard. It can be in ours. Bring it over here. We'll have the trade. We'll have the industry. But yeah, hopefully they don't. Hopefully they don't. Would be a negative thing in my view. That's all. That's all the news, George. And as usual, bang on 30 minutes. My internal clock
Whoosh.
is on fire.
I think you should be in some sort of other role that involves just timing things. I'm not sure if there's a big role for humans in timing things these days, but you'd be very good at it.
Thanks, George. I'm glad you have such high hopes for me. Maybe I'll just like manage athletics tracks and just be like,
have
go!
you ever thought about being a stopwatch?
Yeah, you're so talented, Paul. You should just be a human stopwatch and just count things. You're wasted in reform. Thanks, George. Thanks for believing me, mate. That's why I do this with you, because you believe in me. And until next time, everyone.